too bad that light up the top has to be on.
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates of Executive Council. As previously announced, as there is only one resolution, the discussion will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I just want to begin with a logistical question more than anything, because I hadn't had the ability to coordinate this offline, but I understand that the Premier has an important phone call in about an hour, and you know, I do hope that that call leads to some good things for all Manitobans. So I just wanted to check in, and because I do want to respect the First Minister's time and ensure that he has adequate prep time for the call. So would 45 minutes of questions here provide enough opportunity for him to set up for that appointment coming up?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, thanks very much to the opposition leader for that understanding, and I apologize for this interfering with our estimates process. It's just seems unavoidable. In any case, I share his concerns that we make some progress on a couple of fronts for sure, and I hope to be able to share some positive news with my colleagues as early as the next couple of days on a couple of fronts. Some issues of I know that we all support, that we want to see addressed, some federal commitments that have been made that have yet to be, things like that. So I appreciate your understanding. I'll try to, it's officially 4:15. I would like to, if I could have a couple of minutes to get away from the hustle and bustle and tension the opposition leader is about to cause me, to calm down a little bit before I take it all out on the Prime Minister, that'd be good. I guess seriously, if I could, I'll try to go as close as I can to 4, if that's okay with my colleagues. And if I could, Mr. Chair, I neglected to do something yesterday, and I want to address that. I didn't share with colleagues who is here in the room with me. Obviously, we have some limits to our technology. I wanted to do that. I have the Clerk of the Executive Council and Cabinet Secretary here, David McLaughlin. I have the Associate Clerk of the Legislature and Reg Affairs and Secretary to the Regulatory Accountability Committee, who has the longest title in government's history, Elliot Sims, with me. I also have my Special Assistant, Braden Jones, here. And in addition, Ryan Kloss is here, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Central Finance. And as well, the member for the Interlake has joined us here in the room and is with us at this time. So I hope that will work for everyone. And again, I say thank you to all my colleagues for accommodating the bit of a challenge here that we have today.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
All right, fair enough, and we'll just watch for the clock to strike 4. Just while we're on the subject of staff that works with the Premier, could I ask the Premier to undertake to provide an org chart of the staff who work in Executive Council?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, certainly I will do that. I'll undertake to do that. I appreciate, and I know the opposition leader didn't, this isn't a criticism at all, but doesn't perhaps know how difficult it was to get information like that from a previous Premier. I'll just say this, every year I've undertaken to the best of my ability to provide all the information the members asked for, and I'll keep doing that. And most certainly I'll get him that organizational chart. I don't have everything that I would need to give him right here, or I would table it, I guess, but I can get him that in a reasonable period of time, I hope, and I'd be happy to do that.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
All right, I thank the Premier for that undertaking. And now maybe we'll start with a little less tension at the outset of today. Just returning to the subject of the phone call, I'm just wondering if the Premier can tell us some of his goals and what does he hope to get out of this call with the Prime Minister this afternoon?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. like reminds me when I hitchhiked to university and back for a few years there, this technique we have to use to signal each other. In any case, yeah, the call is centered on COVID-related issues, as the members might expect, although I do use the opportunity whenever I have it in speaking with the Prime Minister and with our federal colleagues to emphasize some other issues as well, and I may use the opportunity to present some of those. I will, for the interests of the members, certainly share with the PM our unanimous resolution today. I think that he needs to know that this doesn't need to be the support for healthcare across the country opportunity for his government doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And, you know, it's supported by us here unanimously with some absences duly noted. That being said, it's also more than a sentiment. It's been adopted supportively by governments across Canada and the territories. I might add, shouldn't forget the territories in this. And I would also say that opposition leaders, Mr. Singh has come out strongly in support of additional resources for the provinces. The official opposition leader, Aaron O'Toole, has said the same thing. And so we know that the opposition parties are ready to step up and are supportive of our shared goals of strengthened federal support for healthcare. This is a critical issue, and it's one that I will use today's discussion, as I have over a number of years now, as an opportunity to reinforce that message. And also the urgent and compelling need for us to have a meeting now. This is tough in COVID, right? We all know. You know, knowing some of the MLAs whose faces I'm seeing here have a reputation for working pretty hard in their constituencies already, some of them very new. And they've done that in previous roles. As I look at the member for Fort Garry, I know that he was involved in school board work for many years, as was the member for Wolseley. In terms of community involvement, the member for Southdale has demonstrably made efforts. But in this COVID period, we all know that it's extremely challenging, right? To have gatherings of any size. Clearly now that's impossible. And so I'm concerned that with respect to the proposal the premiers unanimously have agreed on and have asked for some time to be met by the federal government, that of a national meeting to discuss healthcare funding, it's going to be difficult to have an in-person meeting. I know that. And I'm worried in a way that these types of structures, as good as they are, as good as the tech is, and so on, just aren't always as good as a good old-fashioned face-to-face meeting. I think probably the members will know what I mean, who have worked so hard to have those in their ridings, not just constituency work, but consultation on a broader base level. Really an important thing to do. So I cannot read my clerk's writing, and he's handing me a note. I'm going to hand it back to him. I'll just share that with my colleagues here. So there are just some thoughts. I think before this COVID thing hit us, we all knew that healthcare was a top priority.
1 minute remaining.
We all knew that. Now we know, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and now we know it's certainly in spades. And so any weaknesses in federal-provincial partnership are demonstrably exacerbated by the realities of what we're having to face now. We've got hundreds of thousands of people across the country waiting for procedures that have been delayed. You all know it. I certainly get correspondence all the time. I expect my colleagues do too, from folks who've had their surgery delayed, whether it could be any number of things. And it's painful, and it's hard for people to suffer that way. And those wait times have grown so much over the years. So I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm at the end of my time.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the Premier for that answer. As we all know, the situation in Winnipeg in particular, but Manitoba generally, has become quite dire with respect to the impact of COVID, both in terms of new case counts, but also in terms of what's happening inside the hospitals. And we've heard many concerning statements made by physicians and people who work in healthcare who are warning about what is to come in our hospitals over the next, week or two. So I'm just wondering, with that sort of situation in mind, can the Premier share, what sort of asks to respond to this immediate surge that we're seeing, this immediate second wave impact from COVID, will he be asking the Prime Minister for?
The Honourable First Minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Then, obviously, I'll start with what I hope is the beginning of greater hope for people, and that would be the vaccine. National vaccine preparedness is really, really critical, and we need a strategy nationally on this. And I'll dive into this a little bit because this is really, really important. We've got so many vulnerable people out there who are praying every day for a vaccine to come. People whose families are so afraid, and the research is going on. I mean, I can't say I'm on it every day, but I certainly am on it with regard to talking to Dr. Roussin and others in our medical advisory team that are giving us progress reports, and we're all hopeful of a vaccine's development. But there are challenges with this, obviously, not just in the research side, but let's go ahead for a minute and assume as Dr. Tam has speculated on a vaccine's availability as recently as last Friday and said she anticipates there may be vaccine available to the tune of, I think she said 2 to 3% capacity. Well, by the end of January, if I remember right, and I'm sorry I don't have the news article here, I'd share it with colleagues, but 2 to 3% availability. Okay, so imagine that in your constituency, that 2 or 3% of your constituents might be able to get the vaccine. That could be chaotic, to put it mildly. What we need to do here as a country is make sure that we're very, very clear, very quickly, very soon about what the criteria are for vaccine availability, because there's a lot of fear out there, and it's not confined to 2 or 3% of the population. We're not going to edify the fear by just making a vaccine available to 2 or 3% of your constituents. And we know that. And so the reality is that clearly we have to have those who are at highest risk and those on the front lines as a priority. I think all of us would concur with that. But then what happens as more becomes available? Then what's your criteria? What's the federal government going to propose? What I would not want to see, given that the federal government has basically prohibited us, blocked us, water please, that the federal government is there's here, sorry, right here. Sorry guys, that the federal government has blocked our ability to order vaccines and rapid vaccines. We all know that. And there are arguments for that. I'm not a fan of that, but that's what they've done. They have to also take the ownership of the criteria. They can consult with provincial officials all they want, but what we can't have here is a bunch of provinces with different criteria going out there saying, well, we're doing it this way in Yorkton and we're going to do it this way in Russell. This is a recipe for confusion, potential tragedy. So I don't want to overemphasize this. I don't think I can. It's really, really critical that we have a national strategy for vaccine availability that everybody can understand. It's not going to make everybody happy, but the fact of the matter is everybody will know that's the rules, that's the way it's going to be, coast to coast to coast. And I think this is something other premiers have agreed with, that we need to communicate to the federal government. And I think it needs to get out there fairly quickly so people understand this is how it goes, this is how it's going to go. Sure, we all sincerely hope there's a vaccine for everyone. And not everyone will want a vaccine. We know there are some people who don't believe in vaccines in our province, but most certainly some estimates say 65 to 75% of people would want a vaccine in Manitoba. If that's the case, having a 3% availability is a recipe for a real problem unless we make it extremely clear right away who is going to be able to count on getting that first. And then having a criteria established thereafter. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I didn't answer every aspect. I tried to emphasize something I care about, I guess, there for colleagues, and I hope they think about it and give us their advice and thoughts on what we should do on this one. I appreciate always input from our MLAs, but I will say that I'll share with you more germane to what the opposition leader had just asked me about other items as well here in a sec, Mr. Chair.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And, you know, I would invite the Premier to continue. Maybe you could also just answer, is this the sort of regular call that the Premier has, or that the Prime Minister has convened with all the First Ministers across the country, or is this a one-on-one conversation that's happening today?
The Honourable First Minister.
Yeah, this one is a one-on-one. I'll share with the member, and we have had numerous one-on-ones. I want to say that I thank the Prime Minister for his willingness to have that dialogue. We have had, just for example, yes, we've had a number of Premier's calls. You know, the conference call format that you're all familiar with. We've also had those just with Premiers clearly as well on an almost weekly basis during the entire time of COVID. But this Prime Minister has made himself available. Look, we're all strong-willed people. We wouldn't be MLAs if we weren't. And as my grandfather used to say, if two people are always in agreement, it's pretty obvious one of them ain't doing any thinking. So we're going to have disagreements. That's an honest thing, and that happens. And I don't agree with the Prime Minister. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't agree with me on everything, but he's been willing to have the dialogue, and that's a really good thing. And I congratulate him and thank him for that. And so we have had very good. I think the more, and I think it's true in most relationships, the more that you can get to understand one another, the better chance that you don't have to fall in love with each other, but you can understand each other and have more empathy towards what the other person is trying to accomplish. I've always believed that, and I think that's an important aspect of what we've tried to do. Not just me, but our entire cabinet has endeavored to reach out regularly and consistently to colleagues across the country, as well as experts in various fields. I'll say, just 3 weeks ago, we had another very productive one-on-one with the PM. It was supposed to be face-to-face. As you colleagues remember, we were in Ottawa. It had to be shifted at the last minute, and that was because, if you remember, that was for good reason. I'm not criticizing the PM for shifting it to a virtual meeting. It was a good meeting on a number of good topics. I'll just say that was 3 days after the report came out that Erin O'Toole had COVID. Premier Legault had a meeting with Erin O'Toole. I had a meeting with Premier Legault. Everybody was scared. Everybody was getting, monitoring symptoms or getting tested at that point in time. And so I'm defending, I guess, the Prime Minister, meeting with the PM, very good. Meeting with the Infrastructure Minister, very good, virtual as well. I'm looking to my clerk to remind me of the other, intergovernmental affairs, Mr. McKenna, infrastructure, and colleagues will all know very likely what some of the topics were that were raised on each of those calls and each of those meetings. In addition, we were able, I'll just elaborate on that a bit, because that was a really intense, about 5 days, about 15 meetings in that period, plus the national event with the other premiers where we pushed for the healthcare motion, which essentially is what we supported unanimously in the House the other day. And we met with senior think tanks, experts, conference board, National Chambers of Commerce, Canadian Labour Congress. I could go on. The face-to-face meetings work better most of the time. Someday, maybe we'll get back to where we can have them. I hope so. I think we all hope so. More frequently, it would be better, I think, to get our points across. On this call, back to what the opposition leader was just asking me about, I'm very, very concerned, and we all are, I think, about the situation with respect to northern communities and the northern communities' response, not exclusively
1 minute
First Nations
remaining.
communities. So, Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is really important. There's a federal obligation there that we need to see addressed. And so we are very anxious to make sure that we're getting the message through the federal government to frankly step up their game in respect to First Nations support. It's not exclusively on COVID either. Lab support on testing clearly has always been a concern on an ongoing basis since COVID began. We're concerned about the accuracy, we're concerned about the efficacy, we're concerned about the turnaround times too. And I got about 3 more items I'll share with the members that we're talking about today.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
I would welcome to hear about those 3 additional items, but I also want to put an item on the Premier's radar, maybe flag it for him and do so by way of a question, which is to ask whether the Premier is going to be raising as a contingency possibility with the Prime Minister about potentially activating the military to assist with the pandemic response here in Manitoba. There's been a few situations in which this has been explained to me as potentially being beneficial, to build off the Premier's previous answer in which he spoke about, the COVID response in Northern First Nations. If hospitals in Winnipeg are at capacity, one solution that has been proposed by some folks in healthcare is, that the military be brought in to help with some of the local response.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Regions.
No, not getting through.
You can't hear me? Oh, it's such a great statement. We'll have to restart it all.
We can hear you, First Minister.
I see you. Yours.
Can you hear us?
Because of but the rapid testing comes way ahead of that, because if we get the rapid testing, then we don't need so many of them. So I don't want to agree to military help here necessarily. This is the rapid testing issue.
The Honourable First Minister, can you please mute your microphone?
Sorry.
Can you please mute your
now he's muted
microphone?
on here again.
They're trying to work out the technical difficulty here.
So we can hear you.
Can you hear me? The Honourable First Minister, can you hear me?
I know.
Mr. Moses, this is the chair. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. The Honorable First Minister?
You guys hear me okay now?
Yes, we
Yeah?
can.
Okay, good, thank you.
I'll
Thanks,
let-
Mr. Chair, and
I'll
Sorry.
let the Leader of the Official Opposition finish his question.
oh, okay, sorry.
So you can hear us now? Okay. Well,
The
Oh,
Leader of
sorry.
the Official Opposition.
yes, well, this is the new normal, as they say, and it kind of reminds me of my kids trying to explain TikTok to me, but c'est la vie, so we'll work along with it. So the question I was just asking is whether the possibility of, you know, the military potentially being called into Manitoba as a contingency, not saying, you know, that the Premier should ask for that today, but whether the Premier would just put that on the Prime Minister's radar should things, you know, turn out poorly in northern Manitoba or other regions where they may assist. Would that be a topic of discussion today?
The Honorable First Minister.
Well, I'd say it'd be a topic only of last resort. There's no disputing, though, that the military have lots of resources, and there's precedence clearly here in Manitoba and elsewhere for calling upon military resources. As recently as a few years ago, I remember throwing sandbags somewhere along the Assiniboine River with military personnel during a flood, and there's probably a lot of Manitobans who have similar memories and similar appreciation as I do for the great people, the great men and women that work in our military and their willingness to come here and offer their support when needed. So it's a backup. I'd say to the member, though, that the efforts here, of course, that we're expending on are on preventative work that would make that unnecessary. One of the resources that we hope we don't need, clearly, would be, you know, backup military people in the testing facilities or in the ICUs and things like that. And the way to prevent that, of course, is more rapid testing capacity. We know that it's a real hardship on our frontline folks when they can't get a rapid test because they'd like to be at work. I think of my friends who are nurses, men and women who are dedicated to the task of helping, and when they get a symptom, they're very worried. They don't, so clearly they want to get a test, but if they go and get a test, then, without rapid testing, they're waiting and they're off work a few days. And that's been happening, as we know, on the front lines, not just at ICUs or emergency rooms, but elsewhere throughout our facilities. So rapid testing is a big deal. And we have been pushing, as you know, we did, this is, again, I worry sometimes that we try to make a lot of things partisan, and I'm as guilty as anybody or worse, but I still think we try to make a lot of things partisan on healthcare that we shouldn't. This is not a partisan statement. The feds wanted to coordinate stuff. So they said, you remember back in the spring, we were having trouble getting PPE. The feds said, well, don't worry, we'll look after it. Well, it's a good thing that we didn't believe that. And it's a good thing we took immediate steps to go and work really, really hard to generate our own PPE. And we took those steps, and it ended up well over half of our PPE came from Manitoba-made product. And a lot of it, also additional product beyond that, was procured through Manitoba connections, not through the feds. This is, again, I don't want to take this as a criticism of the feds, but when the federal government says they're going to look after it, it doesn't always work out quite that way. So on the testing issue, rapid testing, they blocked our orders. And I'll be clear about when I say they blocked our orders. What I mean is they signed agreements with lots of producers of vaccine, rapid vaccine, and other materials, antigens and so on, that those agreements were signed with the federal government, those companies. As part of those agreements, they blocked any orders under the agreements they made from sub-national governments, meaning us, okay? So provincial governments were not able to go to the same suppliers and say, okay, look, we understand you've got a big order with the federal government here. Once you've satisfied that order, could we get into a line and we may need additional supplies, right? Or backup in a variety of categories. Our civil servants have been working very hard to try to procure additional supplies in many categories. we've succeeded to a great degree, thanks to the efforts of some really dedicated civil servants, to get a lot of the PPE categories stocked up now. But it's on this rapid testing issue that we are very much at this point dependent on the federal government. So I say that, and I say, well, thank you to them for making available to us the Abbott test. Thanks, Mr. Chair. The Abbott test you're familiar with, I think, more reliable than some of the broader testing materials, rapid testing materials that are out there. The Abbott tests, we have 4,500 of those. Most of them we got in the last 3 or 4 days. All of that will be out in the next 3 or 4 days. And that's really good, because the long answer to the member's concern is we do not want to run out of frontline personnel in any category. And rapid testing is a key part of making sure we keep our people safe and able to go back to work safely, protecting their patients if it's a healthcare institution, their clients if it's a personal care home. Really good progress there. More to be done, and more of that on the agenda today. And I still didn't get the other 3 items I'll share with my colleagues, but I'll do that, Mr. Chair, in a sec.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I just want to pick up on a few different things that the First Minister raised in that previous answer. The first is really just more of a comment, and just to share this in good faith with the Premier about the potential for the military at some point to be deployed. Again, at this point, that's just a contingency option, and I take seriously that the Premier's comments suggest that that's at least some part of the conversation going on in government. But I just wanted to just share with the Premier, in case he hasn't heard this sort of advice, is that from some people on the front lines of our healthcare system, they do expect capacity to be reached within Winnipeg hospitals and across the Manitoba system over the next few weeks. At the same time, we see outbreaks happening in other areas, particularly in northern Manitoba. So some large First Nations. Unfortunately, many people there have to endure very poor living conditions, some of which, like the lack of housing and the lack of clean drinking water, will make it more difficult for people to self-isolate or to abide by the other public health recommendations that could help slow the spread of COVID. And of course, even if the majority of cases are mild in these communities, there will be some people requiring hospitalization. And so it was suggested that because the real bottleneck that we are looking ahead at hospital capacity in Manitoba is related to the number of people who can work in those hospitals, that if more cases arrive, whether from northern Manitoba or from other regions, that the military, on a contingency basis, being activated in that scenario, could potentially help fill the need. And I do acknowledge what the Premier said about rapid testing, potentially allowing healthcare workers to return to the job more quickly, and so I do take that answer seriously. So that was the first piece that I just wanted to share. The second piece of that previous answer that the First Minister shared about was talking about attempting to procure protective equipment. Now, we did see some back and forth with the Central Services Minister making some claims, and then eventually, I believe it was one of the suppliers in question that contradicted what the Central Services Minister made there. So, trying to get at the heart of the matter here, I would ask the Premier, can he undertake to provide a list of the providers where the feds blocked our orders, in the words of the Premier?
The Honourable First Minister.
I was just trying to take some notes there to make sure I do justice to the issues the member raised, Mr. Chair. And I have, I think, got a handle on 3 of the things he raised. The first was in respect of the rapid testing. And the reference to the military. The military is there as a backup. There's a danger in starting to talk about going to the military. There's a danger, and the member knows this, in creating the sense that there is going to be a need for the military, when in fact, the preventative work that's been done is making that less and less likely as we go forward. with respect to the issues around group, the incident command group, kind of misinformed a couple of media reports today, confusing the issue, and I would clarify for our committee members. Incident command is stood up when there's a lockdown. We stood up incident command, as you remember, in the spring. Restrictions with tremendous work from a lot of people, including our caucus members who worked very hard on protocol development with various sectors of the economy. That was a real good effort on their part. Resulted in us being able, as the numbers began to flatten and then to drop, to start to allow businesses to reopen. And everybody remembers that, and I hope everybody was happy about that because it got a lot of Manitobans their jobs back and their lives back. But then it isn't like, well, there's no incident command, so there's no leadership. And the important thing to understand here is that the Provincial Respiratory Virus Steering Committee is the ongoing leadership group, that it was always in place before the command center was activated, after, and that work all continued. So most of the same people involved in that. So I would just share that with members, that understanding be there, because the work of our leadership team in the healthcare system and frankly, our executive leadership team at the cabinet level, at the deputy minister level, right all the way down, was never stopped. The work continued throughout the entire period. So work done on testing, on procurement, on nurse hiring, expansion of personnel, protecting PCHs, all of that work, all that planning continued. The member asked about ICU specifically, and I wanted to make an offer to he and all the members. The work in terms of the ICU planning, the capacity planning, the strategy there, the multi-layered planning that has to happen was months in the making, and that plan is there. I would like to offer I will ask on behalf of our legislators that there be a briefing made available so that all members of the Legislative Assembly who are interested in knowing how that planning works, how that plan works, get a special insight into that. I think it would be helpful. It's a ton of work. I'm not the health expert, but I understand that it's incredibly complex, multi-layered work, and I really respect the people that did the work. So if I could just put that offer out there, I think that could be arranged maybe early next week. I shouldn't speak because it's not like these folks don't have other things on their plate right now, to put it mildly. But I think if we could get a briefing for the MLAs, I think that would be helpful. And that was the second issue the member raised. The issues around PPE, we'd have to get a list from, I guess that would be, is that Reg Howard's guy?
1 minute remaining.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think we should be able to get that for the opposition leader. A list of people that we've asked so far who've told us no because they have the federal government blocking us, is that I think is, to be clear, is I think what he's asking for. And it seems like it's pretty much all the major providers, not just on vaccines either, but on a number of other fronts. As I said earlier, I'm being blunt here, we're not happy about this, but this is the nature of what the feds have chosen to do. And I get that they did it for their own good reasons, but it does limit our ability to some degree to access additional, put it mildly, access additional resources we would all like to have to protect our people here in Manitoba. I hope that was addressing, I may have missed one of the opposition leaders' issues there, Mr. Chair, but I'll be happy to follow up with him as you wish.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll appreciate that undertaking on providing the list from Central Services, the department there. And also, I would take the Premier up on the offer to have a briefing about the ICU capacity and the plans to flex that up. Yeah, so schedule permitting, I guess we'll follow up offline on that one, and I do appreciate the offer. I'm sure many of my colleagues would do the same insofar as they'd take them up on that, and yeah, we'll just look forward to setting that up offline. When it comes to the incident command structure, what the Premier touched on there, can the Premier explain who is a member of that incident command structure? And tell us who decides who is a member there?
The Honorable First Minister.
Yeah, I want to do the members, I'll undertake to do the members' request justice here. And I'm not going to try to impersonate a detailed guy on this one, except to say this. I'll undertake to get the member a detailed list of who is on these groups, but I'll simplify it in this way. Incident command goes deeper. So incident command would go further down the food chain, if you will. You've all seen in your public accounts books, org structures in various departments and so on. So the incident command will go down more into some of the specific areas. Examples could be in the lab area or that type of thing. The ongoing respiratory virus steering committee structure is broad-based, includes all the same people. So it would be a subset sort of higher up the food chain. It's the head people of the various. But when you get into incident command, you may go down further. So for example, the EMO, the Emergency Measures Organization, is part of the Respiratory Virus Steering Committee. But when you get over into the incident command side, it may go down. There may be 3 people from EMO involved in that structure, in that discussion. So one is a subset of the other. This is why, for clarity, it's important to understand when you expand to incident command, that doesn't mean there wasn't a structure in place between, June and the end of September, because there was, and there were lots and lots of people on it. But when you go into a pre or during lockdown situation, then you go to incident command to expand down into the system to get closer, more immediate feedback more rapidly than would be the case with the simpler structure of the Respiratory Virus Steering Committee. So I hope that's a layman's explanation. I hope that helps, and I will undertake to give the members of the committee a complete list of the personnel involved in those calls. I will also say, though, in addition to these calls, are ongoing consultative calls with our small business sector, our I don't know, you could call it what you like, enterprise sector. I forget what the exact name is. This isn't what I need. But I'll give you some examples in a moment when I can obtain them. But I know that in terms of the representative groups, close to 50 different employer groups. We'll go from chambers of commerce right over to manufacturers to business council to sector groups of various kinds. There are dozens of these folks who are on calls. Most weeks throughout the entire COVID period, 2 calls. And then for a brief time, I think in July, there was 1 call a week, back to 2 now. These are consultative calls to get input. How's this working? What's going on? What do we need to do to improve things? What other suggestions or concerns do you have? That type of thing. So that's also going on the economic side, if you will, while the healthcare structure, which doesn't, I mean, they work in conjunction in a sense, but they are separate structures. In addition to that, of course, are almost daily ministerial calls with senior officials as well, to make sure there are no silos existing here in government and that we're aware of what each other's doing and can complement and work effectively together across government. Those undertakings are on a very, very regular basis as well. And I would also mention the tens of thousands of Manitobans who've been gracious enough to give us feedback on the website through Engage MB, Engage Manitoba site. You know, at every approach, every time that we've gone to a phase, we've floated it first with Manitobans to ask for their views, as you know, and then Dr. Roussen's done so, as we did last Friday. Then Dr. Roussen sometimes comes in, or I come in, or the health minister, it depends, and we announce the actual plan, the actual implementation strategies. But Manitobans have had a role in helping in that, and I wanted to thank Manitobans for that and say that's something I would encourage all MLAs to encourage their constituents to be aware of and to use as a vehicle for expressing ideas that will be listened to and respected.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we talk a bit more about the federal government and the provincial governments work together to try and help Manitobans through the pandemic, I'm curious to know about how some of the programs to date that came as part of the Safe Restart Agreement, how those are doing. So I'm wondering if the Premier can talk to us about maybe starting with the testing, the contact tracing, and data management aspect. I believe that the estimated amount for Manitoba was $108 million. Can the Premier provide an update on how much of that money has been spent to date?
Healthcare safety and testing, contact tracing, and data.
The Honourable First Minister.
Because I'm going to go in a few minutes, and I don't want to be harshly accused by the opposition leader of ignoring his requests here on agenda items, and I know he would never do that to me. I would share with him a couple of other things we're going to be talking about with the PM, and then I'll go back to his question in the time I'm allotted, I hope, Mr. Chair. I mentioned the rapid testing. He had raised the issue. Just waiting for the door to close here. The rapid testing, he raised the issue of the military backup. That was in respect of, I think, more the ICU capacity as much as anything else. I think that's the concern, at least from our end, that's one of the principal concerns. ICU overflow issues. Red Cross, I should mention that one as well. Red Cross support for staffing. Wasn't it StatsCan as well, eh? StatsCan, federal government offered us support from Statistics Canada. This was more on the, I think, the bookkeeping side, but also in part, it was, wasn't it on the tracing testing as well? So just to verify and clarify that the feds are forthcoming on those commitments they had made earlier. We'll be raising that. I mentioned the lab support for testing, I think, earlier in the Northern Communities issues. Those are ones, try to stay focused on 4 or 5 key issues in these conversations with the PM, because he's clearly got a lot on his plate too. And those are all priority areas. I hope the members of the committee would agree. And I'll go a little faster on this one and just say to the member, I'll undertake to get him an update on where the money situation is under the Safe Restart Agreement, so that he can actually see where we're at in terms of the accounting for additional federal supports. I would emphasize, it's, not to suggest anything but genuine desire to help is the motive of the federal government, but I have noticed, occasionally at least, tendency for the federal government to want to get noticed when it spends money. I don't think that's unheard of or wrong, but I would say it should be noted that, for example, I've mentioned on the education funding, there was much hoo-hawing from the federal government about supporting education, and we know that 97% of our budget this year will come from Manitoba taxpayers, and 3% will come from federal government's fine generosity in adding to it. So let's not be confused here about who's paying for this stuff. It is mostly Manitoba taxpayers, and that isn't wrong, but let's remember that the exceptional increases in our healthcare budget under this government are being invested and supported by much, much smaller amounts coming from the federal government. So proportionally, basically, when the federal government has said they're giving us money for testing, we thank them, we appreciate that. It's a fraction of what we'll be spending. When the federal government says it's going to help us build capacity, thanks very much. We've been doing that. We were doing that long before you guys showed up and came over the hill acting like cavalry. And we appreciate and thank you for showing up with that additional money. But it is not very much compared to what we're already investing, what we're committing to invest. And as all members of the legislature know, we've added significantly as a consequence of COVID to our spending commitment this year, well over $1 billion additional spending just on healthcare alone. So the federal government's contribution is meaningful, it's appreciated, but again, to put it in perspective, it's Manitobans, it's our constituents that are paying the freight for the vast majority of these things, and I thank the federal government for supporting the effort. So I'll be able to give the member a better breakdown. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be able to give the member a more detailed breakdown. I'll just simply say in a general sense that the bulk of the money on healthcare system capacity has already been expended. That's about 43 million. Vulnerable populations, I think that's all out. That's 27 million. And I mentioned we also did our own program, of course, for the disabled in our province that was well received and needed. That was more than this. Municipalities, that money's all been committed and out. All municipalities in Manitoba of interest to all our members will be in surplus based on their budgeted projections and anticipated additional losses in revenue at their end. And so this is as a consequence and part of the basket funding we negotiated with the federal government and our commitment to maintain funding. City of Winnipeg will actually be in surplus this year.
The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I do thank the Premier for undertaking to provide the update for the Restart Agreement funding. I would note that he had an opportunity, I think, to touch on about 3 of the points. The one that I asked about, I don't think he had an opportunity to touch on that yet, which is one of the ones that I think there was a bit of back and forth between Federal Minister Van Dal and this government, which is the testing, contact tracing, and data management. And then, of course, early learning and childcare. And then, the sick leave, I guess, is a bit of a gray area there. So I do look forward to that undertaking, and I do appreciate the First Minister's ability to provide an update there. I also do want to thank him for sharing a bit of the agenda of what's going to be discussed on the call with the Prime Minister this afternoon. I anticipate that the Prime Minister is going to have his own agenda items, and so whether all of these issues get covered off, we'll look forward to that update from the First Minister. If I could just extemporize for a bit before we adjourn this part of the Estimates Committee, I do want to just share that when it comes to the vaccines, of course, the federal government does have an important role in ensuring that there's an adequate supply, prioritized to those who need it most, be they vulnerable people or healthcare workers who could benefit from it. And I really do hope that we do get a vaccine that's safe and effective, and that it gets rolled out quickly. And I would just add that it's incumbent on all members of the Premier's cabinet to send a strong pro-vaccine message out to the people of Manitoba. Unfortunately, we've seen some flirting with the anti-vaxxer movement, which of course is counterproductive to our goals right now. And so we would hope that everyone can just band together and reiterate to Manitobans why it's important for us all to get vaccines, be that for the flu and then hopefully for COVID, should that become available. Again, I spoke to some degree about the importance of preparing for what may be increased hospitalization needs for people in the north. So if the northern communities point does come up, I would encourage the Premier to just send the message that, yeah, all of Manitoba is concerned about that issue, and we do want people across the province to be healthy. But of course, I would hope that a Jordan's Principle kind of approach could prevail, which is that people get the health care when they need it, and that the various levels of government worry about paying for it after the fact. When it comes to lab support on testing and rapid testing, I do think that is another important area. We know that there are too many healthcare workers, healthcare frontline heroes, who are currently self-isolating or who are awaiting test results. We know that there's been some rapid testing capacity added in Winnipeg, and so that has been welcome, but again, any progress we can do to that would help to make a difference. And when we're talking about the ICU overflow situation, I know that this week the province started talking about a total of 80 beds. I've heard from some sources that we'd be able to increase that up to 100, giving the current space and ventilators and staff working across the province. But hopefully, some of the resources that the First Minister may be able to acquire from the federal government would help us, be those human resources or otherwise, that could potentially help us expand beyond that. Potentially even maybe inviting healthcare workers from other jurisdictions to come into Manitoba and help staff those additional ICU bed spaces.
Order, please. As agreed to today in the House, this section of the Committee of Supply will now move from consideration of the estimates of Executive Council to consideration of the estimates of the Department of Economic Development and Training. Shall we briefly recess to allow the Minister and critic the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department?
Can you hear me in the committee room?
Yes, we can, Minister.
Okay, I'm ready whenever everybody else is. So,
will the Committee of Supply please come to order? We will now consider the estimates of the Department of Economic Development and Training. Does the Honorable Minister have an opening statement?
I do.
The Honorable Minister of Economic Development and Training.
Thank you. 2020 has proved to be a very challenging year so far for all of us as a result of COVID-19 health pandemic. And we truly appreciate the sacrifices Manitobans have made. Our Protecting Manitoba's agenda includes 5 guaranteed commitments to protect Manitobans during the pandemic and see Manitoba prosper after the pandemic. One of those commitments is protecting jobs and restarting our economy with new investment as business supports to create even more new jobs. This includes looking at the economic development landscape in our province, access to capital, tourism, and coming skills and talent knowledge strategy. Having a few technical difficulties getting up and running here. Here we go. Our Restart Manitoba campaign focuses on the importance of public health fundamentals as we learn to live with and rebound from COVID-19. From the beginning of our recovery plans, we have targeted our Restart Manitoba programs with a focus on getting Manitobans back to work safely. Our government is committed to supporting businesses in our communities as we work to create jobs and contribute to the growth of our economy. Our economic relief and recovery programs have included support such as conditional non-repayable loans, targeted wage subsidies, rent supports, deferred fees and interest, rebates, infrastructure spending, as well as non-financial support. The Back to Work initiative, which provides private sector non-profit employers up to $100,000 to subsidize up to 20 new employees to hired since July the 16th. This initiative was extended until December 31st and expanded to allow employers to rehire students that were previously hired through the Manitoba Summer Student Recovery Jobs Program, Canada Summer Job Program, and Green Team Program. The Manitoba Job Restart Program, which successfully supported the transition of over 4,200 people off the CERB program and back to work during critical phase 2 reopening of Manitoba's economy in late June and July. The province is also making increased investment of $5.7 million in the Canada Manitoba Job Grant Program for 2020-2021 to better assist businesses with staff training costs as they recover from COVID-19 pandemic. In support of the tourism and hospitality sector, Travel Manitoba has engaged in a $2 million campaign called Home is Where the Heart Is, safely marketing Manitoba to Manitobans and nearby jurisdictions when it's safe to do so. Our government's COVID-19 recovery investments have supported business to create jobs and encourage employees to safely return to work. Stats Canada released in September labor force numbers. I'm pleased to say that Manitoba is leading the country in private sector job recovery. The unemployment rate has dropped to 7% from 8.3% in August, and we have gained 15,100 jobs. The province is protecting Manitobans through significant investments to support its students, including pausing repayment of student loans, providing wage subsidy programs to employers, creating incentives, and an online job matching website that connects them to employers. Nearly 2,400 employers applied to wage subsidy programs to hire nearly 5,000 students. To quote from one employer, the student wage subsidy program was a lifeline during the summer when many small businesses had difficulty applying for federal support programs. This resulted in Manitoba having one of the lowest youth unemployment rates in all of Canada. These students were able to make money to help them finance their education. At the same time, gain valuable work experience. We're protecting access to post-secondary education by helping students get student loans and bursaries. This is especially important for those experiencing financial hardship due to COVID-19 pandemic. We have made $15 million investment in the Manitoba Scholarship and Bursary Initiative, which will match funding raised by our partners dollar for dollar and provide $30 million to students in scholarships and bursaries. We've also increased the Manitoba Bursary by $1.8 million, providing upfront grants of $2,000 to low-income students and an additional $1,500 to Indigenous students. We're taking steps to protect Manitoba's financial future by ensuring predictability and stability in funding our post-secondary system. We're working closely with our post-secondary institutions to make sure they have the funds to adapt to new ways of learning for students and adjusting to labor market needs. A strong and responsive post-secondary system especially is essential in our recovery, which is why we established a $25.6 million transition support fund, moving and protecting Manitoba's future by addressing today's priorities. People are Manitoba's greatest strength, and new immigrants make Manitoba even stronger, enriching our culture, filling job needs and increasing new ones for themselves and others. Immigration is a key driver of our economic growth, a way to address targeted labor market needs, and a gateway for innovation in our economy. Manitoba's provincial nominee program ensures the province continues to attract skilled workers and entrepreneurs with the potential to make the strongest contributions to our economy soon after arrival in Canada. Once our borders reopen, we'll be ready to welcome new immigrants into our province. Manitoba's economic response to the pandemic has been shaped by input from frequent and regular discussions with stakeholders to protect Manitobans during this unprecedented time. We have built in our pandemic responses in a way to help working Manitobans take full advantage of the federal programs while tailoring strong provincial supports to dovetail with those federal programs. Our approach is working. More than 85% of Manitobans who lost their jobs in March and April have been rehired, making our unemployment recovery rate the best in Canada. I want to say that it's been an honor to represent our government in economic development and training. It's been a rewarding almost a year now since my anniversary. In fact, it was October the 23rd. So we've had some challenges and I'm looking forward to getting into the estimate process with my various critics, whether it be post-secondary, economic, immigration, tourism, etc. So I'll close with my comments there, Mr. Chair.
Does the official opposition critic have any opening comments?
Yes.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you to the Minister and the staff for taking the time today to meet with us and discuss the various issues. I think it's important that we sit down and do this and discuss how we can go about making sure our economy is thriving as much as it can be throughout this recession and pandemic that we're all facing. And I think that's one of the critical parts to remain focused on, is that the economy that we're in today is drastically different than it was a year ago when you took the role, as you mentioned, your anniversary. And so I'm well aware that any plans that you would have had for our economy and your job in creating jobs and growing business in Manitoba would be, we should have a different approach than you did when you initially took on your role. And I think that would be very appropriate, because we're right now living in a world with higher unemployment than we had last year. More people who are looking at desperate financial circumstances, personal financial circumstances, whether it's a loss of jobs, difficulty with affordability. There are so many challenges economically, and that is leaving out the fact that small businesses have been struggling recently with regulations, closures, and even this week going into the new Code Red restrictions. Small businesses are facing even further pressure. And as the economic development minister, you should be well aware that these issues shouldn't be taken lightly. And, I would hope that as we go through this discussion, we have, strong awareness that we are in a different time and it needs to be attacked with a different approach, a new and an innovative approach, and helping people through their difficulties, helping to bridge businesses till the end of our recession, and ensuring that Manitobans can get through this as healthy and as safely as possible, but also in the best financial and economic footing as possible. So I'll conclude with that, and I look forward to our time discussing today. Thank you.
Under Manitoba practice, debate on the minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 10.1 brackets A contained in resolution 10.1. Does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically or have a global discussion?
I suggest a global discussion.
The member for St. Vital.
I suggest a global discussion.
It has been suggested that we proceed with a global discussion. Is that agreed to?
That's fine by me, Mr. Chair.
Agreed. Thank you. The floor is now open for questions. The member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to begin with just simply touching on some comments that were made earlier today, and announcement from the Premier as to calling on Manitobans to do some volunteering, specifically volunteering when it comes to the healthcare services or helping out in the ways they can in terms of the pandemic. Now, we all know that, Manitobans have a great spirit of volunteerism, and I think that's something that we all should be we should commend our citizens for that. However, from an economic standpoint, I think we all know the value of adding jobs to our economy. And so if the province is looking to get work done, wouldn't it serve our economy better to actually be increasing employees, even if it's on a temporary basis, so that money can get flowed through our economy and actually give people the enhanced financial benefit of working instead of just simply volunteering?
Could we ask the Honourable Minister to indicate by a raised hand when he's ready to respond? The Honourable Minister.
I'm getting used to this mute button. It's interesting. Manitobans have, as a member opposite said, been very good at not only donating their time and their money, but their skills. And not everybody is into the point where they want to go back to work either part-time or full-time, but make a contribution and feel part of the solution when it comes to giving back and helping fight this pandemic. So I see nothing wrong with volunteerism. Something that just comes natural for Manitobans, something that's been bred into our generations from generation to generation. And I know in my family donated times, many times, not only their money, but their time to various things. And I never want to take away that for Manitobans, and nor would I. But I know my children do the same thing, and my grandkids have done the same thing, especially during COVID. They feel that responsibility, that commitment in order to help other Manitobans. And quite frankly, it instills a confidence in Manitobans that others are prepared to step up while having to be paid for it to do it. So, but we're open to hiring folks too. We will be doing similar to what we did with the COVID testing. We partnered with Red River College in order to ensure that folks had the right skill set to work in, whether it be the testing or the data labs or others, in order that we have the skill set that we need. So yeah, we'll be looking at all those things, but I, for one, will be ensuring that volunteerism stays alive and well in Manitoba while still creating jobs and economic growth within our province of Manitoba.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you for that, Minister. Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask just to follow up on that a bit and say that we all know that volunteerism is very important in our province. And I think if you go to any community center and ask them if they need volunteers, they say yes. If you go to any church group, there's so many not-for-profit that are looking for volunteers. And I think there's many Manitobans who give up of their time. The issue isn't that we need to encourage more volunteers. There are opportunities out there. The problem is that we need more jobs in our province. This is an opportunity to pay Manitobans for work that the province is seeking and actually recycle some of that money to grow our economy. By not doing so, is this a missed opportunity to actually grow our economy in Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, thanks for the question.
Sorry, the Honourable First Minister? Sorry, the Honourable Minister.
That could be a position replacement for the chair. No, I'm just kidding. You're doing a great job. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this a bit more. Like I said earlier on, I'm very much in favor, and the member talked about church groups. I know within my church group, we have volunteer cleaners. We have people that come in and make sure everything's sanitized. And there's a lot of opportunities for Manitobans that just feel the need that they want to do that. Now we are listening to Dr. Roussin. We want to ensure that that we have the protections in place. But really, we have created a lot of jobs with our job program, where we offer up to $5,000 per employee, up to 20 employees. We have several businesses that have taken advantage of that, and they will take advantage of that. However, government will not be taking advantage of our own programs, because that's not how it works. This is made for employers to create jobs, and certainly we'll be doing that, and we have been doing that. I know that that in talking to businesses, they don't use that up to $100,000 just for wage salary. Some of them use it for PPE equipment, some use it for renovations, some are using it to upgrade their restaurant or their business in order to ensure there's better, safe working conditions. The list goes on, but yeah, we understand that we want more jobs for Manitobans. And as I said earlier on in my opening comments, just for the previous month, 15,100 new jobs speaks loud and clear that Manitoba is open for business, and we'll continue to work with business in partnership and nonprofits in order to ensure that we have people getting back to work in a timely manner. And a lot of folks are working from home, and that's fine too. But that has a small ripple effect on our restaurants downtown, others that rely on that walk-up traffic. It's a fine blend. It's an opportunity for us to make sure we get it right. So really important. I know our unemployment rate is at 7% currently. On a national level, it's 9%. So Manitoba's doing okay, but we can sure do better. Absolutely.
The member for St. Vital.
All right, so I'd like to ask and switch over a little bit to the Manitoba Restart programs. And if it's easier for the minister, I could, I'm looking for just some, facts and figures information. Maybe it's easier for him to provide these to me, endeavor to provide these to me at a date with, I'm looking for, the budgeted amount and the actual spent amount for some programs, such as the Summer Student Recovery Jobs Program with, for not-for-profits as well. Manitoba GAP program, Manitoba Job Restart program, risk recognition, commercial rent assist, and their event attraction strategy. If we could, minister could provide budgeted amount to date, as well as actual spent amount to date for those items, either now or it can endeavor to provide those to me.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you. Yeah, our programs are very full. The timelines, some have lapsed, but all of the funding hasn't actually flowed. Multiple of our programs are still in place till December 31st. What we will do is endeavor to get a most up-to-date numbers for the member in order to ensure that he has the same data that we have. And as we talk, applications continue to come in on a regular daily basis. People applying for funds, new businesses that are just starting up, trying to figure out what they can apply for, and also what it means. And with the federal programs changing on a daily basis has a ripple effect on our programs too. So we will get the numbers for the member, and we'll mail them to him within the required time, if not sooner than later, so he has that good information.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you. I appreciate the minister's efforts to send me that information. That's be much appreciated. Looking at a couple of those specific programs, looking at, for example, sorry, I wanted to touch on the ad campaign when it comes to, the Ready, Safe, Grow campaign, and wanted to touch on the allotted budget that was allotted for that, and how much of that has been spent. I wanted to talk about that one specifically, and whether it was when it was rolled out and continues to roll out now, be used now. If the minister feels that was and has been an appropriate, use of government resources throughout this pandemic, as we've seen increasingly high numbers over the last several weeks, to have that message, Ready, Safe, Grow, out there with millions of dollars spent on campaigns. So I wanted to just talk about the budget for that, and then the minister's thoughts on that program in light of recent COVID case numbers.
Just a reminder to all members of the committee, if you choose to talk on your phone during this committee hearing, you should turn off your video, please. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, and I thank the member for the question. Our province is committed to ensure the safety and healthy throughout the pandemic and provides access to healthy, safe resources. The Restart Manitoba campaign focuses on the importance of public health fundamentals as we learn to live with and rebound economically from the pandemic. It's imperative that we work with the information that employers and individuals need to safely do their business, return to work, and move across the province confidently and safely. Restart Manitoba allows us to do that. This also has a lot to do with shared health. So it's a program that's going to help us make sure that not only the employees are safe, but also their customers and others that feel safe. And that's really what we've been trying to do, is talk about the confidence that Manitobans need, whether it's the employee, the consumer, the customers, whatever it needs to do to help us restart our economy in a way that's going to be safe. And that's been paramount through our throne speech, through the whole pandemic, is that how do we protect Manitobans first and foremost?
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you for that. I was also hoping to receive the amount spent for that. So maybe in the minister's next opportunity, he can provide that information. I believe it reported in August that it was around $425,000. I assume it's at least above that at this point, but wanted to get the minister's confirmation on that. Additionally, I did want to ask about another program that the minister is looking at, and that's the, even the rewards risk recognition program. We know that was a program that was offered back in the spring, early summer for essential workers. Right now, we're in the thick of the pandemic. Essential workers have never been working harder than they are right now. So is this something that the minister is looking at bringing back to show their appreciation for the extremely hard work that essential workers are doing today, this week, during the height of that pandemic?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for the question. I can confirm that the original budget amount was $425,000 for that program. We will confirm how much is spent to date when we get back to the member on the others. We don't have that at this point in time. On the Rewards Rest program, that was run through finance, so we have no data on that particular program. I would suggest that the member ask his critic for finance to take that question forward through them, as we don't have the data because it's not our program.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to know regarding the GAP program, Manitoba GAP program. whether you had data on how many businesses have actually received money from that program?
The Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I regret to have to do this again, but again, that program was run through the Minister of Finance Department. I don't want to put false information or unrealistic numbers on the record because I don't have them. But again, I would suggest the member or the other critic for finance ask the Minister of Finance those questions. And they're ever changing as well. But I can tell you that as the Minister of Economic Development and Training, we did have a lot of folks that reach out to us and say, thank you. We really appreciate that. Even though it was $6,000 in the GAP program for business, it didn't seem like an awful lot of money. But for a small business, it did a lot. And that was in the managed of a line. You did not have to pay that back. It was a loan. Non-repayable loan that was available for business. But again, that program was run through finance.
The member for St. Vital.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I would like to know two parts. Is that one, I would like to know how many small businesses have actually closed down and shut down or had layoffs. I know that certain businesses do report their layoffs and their closures to the minister, so I wanted to get a report on that. But furthermore, we've heard many reports from media in the past few days as we've come into this code red, and they've used terms such as small businesses are facing, a long cold winter, facing the weather indoors under a code red restriction. And these small businesses are looking to get assistance. I'm wondering whether the minister is considering proposing additional financial supports for small businesses in light of the recent code red put on. And again, the first part of that is to talk about how many businesses have actually shuttered already in 2020.
The Honorable Minister.
Thank the member for the question. As far as the business closures is concerned, we don't have that data. Again, it falls underneath finance, under the employment standards area. Layoffs and those and closures are reported to finance first. We hear rumblings about business closing. However, we don't have enough data on it to give the member the right information. So again, but in regards to our programs, Premier's been very clear, and from my stakeholders calls that I've had with the various stakeholders, we've had 47 calls with the stakeholders, listening to their concerns, what programs are working, what programs are not. As the Minister of Economic Development and Training, we have a pipeline, if you will, to the federal government to provide feedback to whether it be Minister Jolie, Minister Ng, Minister LeBlanc, in order to reach out to them on weekly calls. I might add, up until just recently with Minister Jolie, we were meeting on a phone call once a week, and she wanted that feedback just like we do. What's working, what's not working, how do we make it better? And then us as a province, how do we fill the gap, fill the hole that we need to fill in order to make sure our businesses stay open and stay profitable and stay there for the long term. So we help through a number of our programs to hire youth and students. Code Red has added to our challenges. We are acting under the health system, and we have to make sure that when we look at these programs, that actually our businesses can qualify for Manitoba programs, federal programs, so they're not seen as double dipping, if you will. A lot of the employers in the province of Manitoba have taken advantage of the wage subsidy program, which is immense. Also, those programs change on a regular basis. For example, business had an opportunity for a $40,000 loan from the federal government, of which $10,000 was forgivable, and the money had to be paid back by December 31st of 2021. Just recently, as of last week, there was an additional $20 million that was added to that to raise it to $60,000, and another $10,000 of non-repayable. So really critically important that when we meet with business, when we talk to business, that we understand the impacts that it has on our business. And so it's not just all about Manitoba money, it's about federal money, making sure they get the right program for them. And that's what we've been trying to do to get through on these calls with our stakeholders. Really, what is it that we need to focus on? For example, the Rent Assist program, the first one was a complete failure. We could not bring anything together that was going to be substantial to assist our businesses. But I have to say that the federal government did listen to us and other provinces as well. This is not just Manitoba talking, this is all provinces talking with our federal colleagues. So whether it be NDP government in BC or us here in Manitoba with our government or Alberta or others. But certainly we listened and they listened. And
1 minute remaining.
Tried to adapt. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We try to adapt these programs to make sure they're sustainable for our business and long-term, so we have the confidence for the employees and for the employers going forward.
The member for St. Vital.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So having said that, I can assume that since the minister didn't clearly outline anything, that I should assume that there's no new programs coming in, even though businesses face a very difficult time over the next certainly few weeks under a Code Red situation. But furthermore to your comments about consultation, I did want to ask specifically about the Economic Opportunities Advisory Board, whether we can get a list of participants and members on that board, and also any meeting minutes, just so that we can get a scope of the type of consultation that the minister is having with regards to decision making on programs. The other question that I want to ask is in regards to the minister's comments about kind of double dipping of programs, federal and provincial, and why the minister thinks that is a considerable an issue, right? I think every economist would say that during a recession, you want to bring as many dollars into economy as possible. And so where really does the minister's concern come in with double dipping of programs? If we can get more money into our economy, why wouldn't the minister be in favor of that?
The Honourable Minister.
I'll give the member an example. Federal programs are very complicated. Our programs are fairly simple. When a business applies for a $6,000 GAP program, makes them ineligible for the $40,000 to $60,000 loan program, where they would get, if they borrowed the $60,000 from the federal government, they would lose that $20,000 benefit by taking $6,000. So that's why it's important to understand the programs, and business has to understand the programs, so it don't make them ineligible for the funding that they might be able to get federally. So when we look at this, we got to make sure we're giving them the right advice. A lot of them don't have full-time accountants. A lot of them are small mom and pop businesses that could take advantage of these programs. Then there's others that are larger firms that can afford information. So when COVID first broke out and the federal program started to get to where they were meaningful for a number of our businesses, and we restarted our economy, we actually contracted with 24/7 to help us reach out, because there was a number of businesses that really wanted to get some help and make sure that they got the right programs to match their business needs. So these businesses that got the wage subsidy or the $40,000 loan or the rent assist that didn't work, all these programs are interconnected. So that's why it's important. I'll share with the member that it's not so much about double dipping, it's about making sure they get the right program to help them stay strong and keep their employees employed, and make sure when these other programs come out that they're eligible for them by not having a program that's a provincial fund as opposed to that of a federal fund. So it's just not allowable, and we want to make sure businesses have the information they need to be most beneficial for them.
The member for St. Vital.
Thanks. I also wanted to I did ask about the Economic Opportunities Advisory Board in the last question. So wondering if the minister can provide a list of participants and members of that board and any minutes that would provide us an example of the advice the minister's getting us to new programs. And that leads me to my next question, is that ministers mentioned this a couple times, that he's consulted with many businesses and looked at ways programs can be tweaked or made better. You know, and we've had the benefit of several months of being in this pandemic. We know what it looks like, and we're learning that, and we've seen what it's done, but we haven't really seen new programming come out to assist small businesses in several months. We haven't seen new financial supports for small businesses or individuals. And I'd like to know what the minister has been doing with some of this consultation, whether the minister is actually going to bring in new programming to support small businesses. Since that now we've had several months to be in this pandemic, and we're looking at being in a code red situation here in Winnipeg.
The Honourable Minister.
I'm trying to be able to respond in a very quick manner to help my colleague from St. Vital. The Premier's Advisory Committee was established on May the 13th. There was a document that's public information. I won't take time to read it all, but it's certainly there. If he has trouble finding it, send me an email. We can send it to you, but it's public documentation. So that's easy enough. In regards to our stakeholders and the consultation, I won't share the list with him, but it's almost every sector, whether it be the Manitoba Chamber, Winnipeg Chamber, Manitoba Heavy, the list goes on, but it represents hundreds of thousands of employees across the province. And when we talk about these programs, we need that feedback to try and make those programs better. Coming back to what I talked about earlier, whether it's a federal program or a provincial program, we want to make sure the businesses in Manitoba have access to these programs. So if they're not working, let's tweak them so to make sure they do work. And this is why it's critically important to have these relationships with the business sectors. And I can tell you that they're not shy in sharing their information. That's what's working and what's not. So we'll continue to do that. As we start to look towards Christmas, I know it's really important. I still get calls on a daily basis wanting to know what programs are out there. A lot of them are understanding it, but yet they still don't understand the program. So as we ramp up for Christmas, we have applications still going out each and every day for businesses wanting to hire people back, hiring students back that's on the programs, those that went to the summer jobs, hiring them back to work in stores, getting ready for Christmas. So we will continue to work with business to make sure our programs meet their needs now and into the future.
The member for St. Vital.
I'll ask this just again quickly, and then I'll pass any time I have over to the member for St. Boniface. Just want to kind of find out again from the minister, you know, we've been several months without a significant new program or a new set of dollars for small businesses. They've been through a lot over the last few months and continue to be so, and even more so now. With that consultation, is the minister looking at supporting and providing any financial supports, whether it's through rent, whether it's direct financial supports for small businesses, whether it's even helping them with getting supply of PPE? These are all be things that I've talked to businesses that they would appreciate directly from our provincial government. Is the minister looking at doing any of these that would actually help small businesses in the short term weather the storm of being in a code red?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you, and thank the member for the question. We've expanded our wage subsidy program now not once but twice. We may well expand it again. What it is doing is helping people get their lives back. It's helping small business to address the cash flow demands. They've been paying 50% of their salaries of employees up to 20 employees, up to $100,000 available for small business. The qualifications are not hard to satisfy, and the approval rating happens quite quickly so that businesses can have the confidence to get people back to work and new employees started. Also, in regards to training, we, through my department, has federal dollars that will help employees be able to get back to work. We can help with those training dollars to ensure businesses have the right dollars and allocated to them to train their employees to make sure they're not only safe, but in compliance with the regulations that we need. Also, the elimination, or part of the elimination of the education tax on property. We made that very clear that the education tax on property will be eliminated as we go forward. That'll help them. Also, we need to make sure that these supports are there when they need them. Not everybody is at the same time in the same place. So as the member opposite talked, a lot of small businesses are struggling. Other small businesses are doing very, very well. So it's making sure we have the support for business at the right time for those businesses so they're able to be sustainable long term.
The member for St. Boniface.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think this was as big a waste of everyone's time as it was of mine. The answers are absolutely pathetic. The fact is that you're gutting post-secondary. You're responsible. There we
The
go.
hour being 5 o'clock, committee rise.